The third season of House of the Dragon has finally come to an end, and oh my god, if that wasn't peak, I don't know what is. Firstly, rest in peace, our sweet, sweet Helaena. This world of fire and blood could never deserve your gentle dreamer of a soul. Having said that, it's making sense why George R.R. Martin decided to walk out of the writer's room here, because the plot truly is getting further away from what we read in the books. With Daemon and Caraxes leading the Battle of Tumbleton with the hopes of saving Rhaenyra's image within the realm, and Ulf choosing to rain down dragonfire on both sides at the battle, this battle's been nothing short of tragic. There's also the fact that Aegon has tapped into his Targaryen madness. So, it's not long before he and Aemon will end up cooking their own plot to bring the queen to her knees. This battle was truly one of the largest set pieces the show has ever produced, and we know that Ryan Condal spent the entire season building up to it. The showcase of multiple dragons, the winter wolves, the rivermen, and of course the last-minute plot twists were a great treat to the eye. This truly was the most Game of Thrones coded episode in the entire show yet. But after the dust of the battle has settled, during the end moments of House of the Dragon Season 3, the entire market town of Tumbleton is laid in ruins. We know Ormond Hightower is dead for good. That too, in the most beautiful manner. The biggest question at the moment stands for Daeron Targaryen. Where is the young prince by the end of this heroic battle? Did Daeron survive that day? Given that we might have to wait another 2 years for the answer, let's do what we do best and discuss what might have befallen the young prince at the end of the Battle of Tumbleton.
Like I said, the season ended without us finding out the full ramification of the show's largest battle yet. And by that I mean, Queen Rhaenyra still has no whiff of Ulf the White's betrayal, or the fact that the Blacks lost the battle. And judging by the rising darkness in her, I wonder if she'll even take that news too well. For the moment, we can be sure that everyone out there from both factions of the war are out for Daeron's head. Sure, Aegon and Aemon certainly won't kill their brother, but like Helaena said, there's more to life than not being destined to die. And Daemon? Well, Daemon won't think twice before burning both Daeron and his blue dragon to a crisp, once he gets his hands on them. Meanwhile, we see just how badly Daeron wants to avoid all this carnage around him, and even tries to fly into battle on his dragon Tessarion, who's been locked up in Tumbleton Sept for most of the season, all thanks to Uncle Ormond, of course. Now, people like us who've read the books already understood what was coming when Lord Ormond Hightower took over the market town of Tumbleton at the beginning of the season. Because of the loyalty that this unassuming settlement had for the Queen of the Blacks, Ormond didn't just take the city, but also stooped low enough to use the innocent locals as literal human shields, so that Rhaenyra can't burn the city down without burning the small folk. But then the so-called resurrection of Aegon and his dragon Sunfire really did push Rhaenyra to the edge. And that's probably why she rushed to the old man who would move the earth for her just to consolidate her reign on the Iron Throne. Yeah, I'm indeed talking about Daemon Targaryen. I think at that point Rhaenyra understood that using her father's playbook of ruling the Seven Kingdoms will only end with her head on a spike outside the walls of the Red Keep, and so she finally sent Prince Daemon to lead the Battle of Tumbleton alongside the Winter Wolves and the Rivermen. Daemon loves a fight, but he also understands the importance of battle not ending with Rhaenyra being painted as the monster. Of course, the rogue prince didn't know that while he had the numbers to favor his assault, Lord Ormond Hightower is a trickster of the finest kind. Right from day one, he's been pulling every possible card out of his sleeve to defame Rhaenyra, kill her gold cloaks, and sow the seeds of distrust amongst the small folk of King's Landing. He even manipulated Ulf the White to betray his queen, just by playing on his ego after Daemon humiliated him in public. But that wasn't even the worst of it, because when the Black Army finally approached the bounds of Tumbleton, Ormond had literal children manning the front line of the battlement, just so that Daemon can't blast in from above with dragonfire. Now, Ulf was actually the most important chess piece on the board for the Lord of Oldtown, but of course the idiot was nowhere to be found when the battle was on full force. After pretty much turning the town over, a very, very drunk Ulf is found by Ormond and his men. That too, while he'd passed out on a toilet with his pants down. By then, the walls of the city had already been breached by Daemon and his army, so naturally, Ormond loses his calm and absolutely berates Ulf by cursing and kicking Ulf, just like Daemon had done before. Now, at this point, the Blacks already had the first success, with Roddy the Ruin and the Winter Wolves breaching the fortified walls of Tumbleton and absolutely raw-dogging the battle with pure madness. Meanwhile, Oscar Tully and Black Aly broke in through the south walls of the city, and pretty smoothly, I might add. Now, Daemon did hesitate to breach the main gate with Caraxes, especially with Ormond's men pushing in the last group of kids right in front of the gates. The rogue prince still made it through by burning it down with Caraxes' dragon flame. But as the battle progressed with the Greens losing pretty badly, the tides turned when Ulf taking to the skies and setting scores of Riverland's troops ablaze. Of course, the Black Army was mortified at this betrayal, but one good certainty came out of it, as Roddy the Ruin sodomized Ormond Hightower to death with his sword right before Silverwing set him ablaze. However, Ulf did not just stop at that, as he also ended up turning on the Greens by going full Dracarys on the defenseless city of Tumbleton. Even if Daeron and Gwaine did have a small window of hope where the battle would not end with them meeting a pointless death, Ulf's chaotic approach certainly stole that away. I guess that's what happens when you let a drunk buffoon mount a magnificent beast like Silverwing. Anyway, in the whole mess, the small folk are the ones who really suffer the most, as the city is absolutely annihilated with fire and blood. In fact, the sudden rain of dragon flame puts both sides on the back foot, and while our rogue prince does make an attempt to push his way through the battle, Lord Corlys Velaryon shows up to explain how Ulf has turned and now the fight is over, as the battle has been lost. A frustrated Daemon has no option but to leave before it's too late, and the battle ends as Gwaine wakes up in the rubble of the battle, calling out for his nephew. I know at this point it's really easy to believe that Daeron might have ended up dead, especially because Tessarion was still chained up by the time Ulf attacked the Greens. However, I doubt we've seen the last of him yet. Although I know that Ryan Condal has been deviating a bit too much from the source material, I doubt he'll kill off the young prince before we get to see how he becomes Daeron the Daring, especially now that Ormond Hightower is no longer around to hold him back. Of course, we'll discuss the possibilities of Daeron's fate in the final season of House of the Dragon. But before that, let's take a gander at how his character arc unfolds in George R.R. Martin's Fire and Blood. So Daeron has played a rather important role in the books even before the events that led up to the second season of the show. In Fire and Blood, Daeron Targaryen was born late 114 AC, shortly after Rhaenyra gave birth to her oldest son, Jacaerys. Like in the show, Daeron already had 2 older brothers and 1 older sister. According to the books, during this time, the rift between Alicent and Rhaenyra had become unbearably worse, and they always quarreled and never got along. So, in the hopes of helping his family get along, Viserys made Jacaerys and Daeron share a wet nurse. He believed that it would help them forge a different bond that might just break the ice between the two sides. But then Daeron grew up alongside Aegon and Aemon, who poisoned his mind against Rhaenyra's children, leading him to become bitter towards Jacaerys, Lucerys, and Joffrey. Even though Daeron and his siblings were forced to spend a lot of time with their nephews during training at arms, studying with maesters, or attending feasts, they still couldn't sort out their arguments, and so the hostility simply kept increasing. Apparently, Daeron bonded with Tessarion at the age of 6, and was eventually sent to Old Town at the age of 12 to serve as a squire and a cupbearer to Lord Hightower. In Fire and Blood, Daeron was considered to be the most popular prince out of Alicent's 4 children. He's been described as gentle, courteous, soft-spoken, handsome, and smart, which made him the most promising son of Viserys and Alicent. And by the looks of it, the show's depiction of Daeron clearly aligns with his counterpart in the books. Anyway, after Otto was dismissed as Hand of the King by Aegon II, he told Alicent that he would return to the Hightowers to mentor Daeron instead, as he was more receptive to instruction, and I don't know if you remember, but this is exactly what Otto wanted to do in the show as well, until of course Larys had him caged in the dungeons of the Red Keep. Having said that, I need you to know that Fire and Blood is written in the style of a real history book. So, according to the book, in 129 AC, after the death of King Viserys I Targaryen, the Dance of the Dragons began with Daeron's older brother, Aegon II Targaryen, claiming the Iron Throne for himself, even though their half-sister Rhaenyra Targaryen had already been named by Viserys as his heir. At this time, Daeron was still in Old Town, serving as squire for Lord Ormond Hightower. When both the factions were out for blood after the death of Prince Lucerys Velaryon and Prince Jaehaerys Targaryen, Daeron joined Lord Ormond Hightower's army as they marched from Old Town to join forces with the Green faction. During the Battle of the Honeywine, Ormond was almost on the verge of defeat until Daeron swooped in on Tessarion to rescue the entire army. In gratitude, Ormond celebrated Daeron with a whole feast and knighted him with a Valyrian sword Vigilance, bestowing upon him the title of Daeron the Daring. But sadly, their relationship in the show is completely twisted, with Ormond trying to use Daeron as a pawn in his schemes of trying to become the most powerful man in the Seven Kingdoms. Anyway, after Aegon was injured in the Battle of Rook's Rest, Aemon took over the command and believed that his uncle, Daemon, was the greatest threat to their rule. He was determined to defeat him in battle and wanted the glory of defeating Daemon all for himself. So he didn't even bother asking Daeron for his assistance while planning to retake Harrenhal from Daemon. Later, Aemon died during the duel with the Rogue Prince in the battle above the God's Eye. But before that, Rhaenyra took over King's Landing. Even in the book, the Queen considered Daeron to be the biggest threat to her rule, especially given his skills as a warrior. Meanwhile, Daeron stayed with Lord Ormond Hightower's army and went on to scout ahead of them on Tessarion. By then, everyone in the realm had heard the many tales of Daeron's adventures on Tessarion. So, in order to avoid Caesarion's wrath, the Shield Islands, House Oakhart, and House Rowan submitted to the Green faction. However, Daeron refused to show any mercy to Lady Caswell because his nephew, Prince Maelor Targaryen, had lost his life at Bitter Bridge. So he sacked the city and had Caesarion burn down the entire town during the sack of Bitterbridge. During this time, Rhaenyra had sent Ulf the White and Hugh Hammer on their dragons to defend Tumbleton against Daeron and Caesarion. Now, in the book, during the first Battle of Tumbleton, it was actually both Hugh and Ulf who betrayed Rhaenyra and switched sides to join the Green faction. This is also when Ormond Hightower lost his life during the battle, thus allowing several nobles to argue over who should be responsible to lead the command of the Green faction in battle. Meanwhile, Sir Hober Hightower was ordered by Daeron to stop the brutal pillaging of Tumbleton, but he failed. Eventually, everything began to fall apart for the Greens, as even Hugh and Ulf refused to join Daeron in an attack on King's Landing unless their demands were met. Apparently, naming Ulf as the Lord of Bitterbridge was just not enough, and they both had insatiable demands for more. I doubt this part of the lore will be adapted into the show, especially with Ulf going full rogue in the last episode. Anyway, just like we see in the show, in Fire and Blood as well, after the fall of King's Landing, Aegon II went missing. Now, unlike their oddly funny and heartfelt reunion at Harrenhal in the Season 3 finale, Aegon never really reunites with Aemond again, probably because by the time he rises to power again, the One-Eyed Prince has already been killed in the battle above the God's Eye. Now, with his first two brothers assumed to be dead, Prince Daeron was the first in line for the Iron Throne. So, Lord Unwin Peake, one of the leaders at Tumbleton, urged that Daemon should immediately be declared as the Prince of Dragonstone. Not just that, the other nobles of the realm who believed Aegon II to be dead wanted Daeron to be crowned as their king. During this time, Hugh Hammer claimed that he should be the king of the Iron Throne and the Seven Kingdoms, shocking everyone with this bold declaration. It's said that Daeron threw wine in his face as a response to his claim, and following that, Hugh started wearing an iron crown and began preparing to make his claim turn into a reality. This gravely offended the Lords and Knights of the Reach, as they simply could not comprehend the betrayer's arrogance and formed a group known as the Caltrops. This group began plotting the deaths of the betrayer and everyone else who supported his cause. Although Daeron was not a member of the Caltrops, the group definitely sought his consent before acting on their agenda, and Daeron apparently gave them a thumbs up without any hesitation. Just 2 days later, the Second Battle of Tumbleton began, and it's said that Prince Daeron died fighting during the battle. While the exact circumstances of his death are still unclear, the most common story is that Daeron was killed by Black Trombo with a morning star while stumbling out of his tent with his clothes on fire after Adam's dragon Sea Smoke began his attacks. But there's also another version that says he was murdered by a random man-at-arms with a sword, as they didn't know who Daeron really was. Lastly, a third account, which was supported by both Munkin and Gildane, claims that Daeron's burning tent collapsed on top of him, which was what ultimately killed him. Whatever it might be, Daeron the Daring's death is the most mysterious part of the Dance of the Dragons, because his body was never identified, so nobody really knows for sure what happened to him. And because of this very dilemma, many people tried to seize this opportunity, pretending to be the young prince so that they could make false claims during the reign of King Aegon III Targaryen. But none of these men were actually Daeron Targaryen, as Master Yandel confirmed that they were all proven to be imposters. Because Prince Daeron's body was never found, fans believe that he secretly survived and chose to leave his old life behind in order to live a life of anonymity. Honestly, even if this is just a theory, it might be easy for Daeron to choose to leave everything behind, especially because he doesn't have the Targaryen silver hair in the show. Now, among the many differences that House of the Dragon lines up with the book when it comes to the first Battle of Tumbleton was the fact that Daeron never flew to Caesarion to the battle against the Black Army. So, if the show actually decided to kill him off here while he was struggling with Caesarion's chains when Ulf was setting the city aflame, it might just line up with the whole ambiguity of how his character died in the book, especially because they never found his body. But if you were to ask me, I doubt Ryan Condal will choose to take that route, especially because we had an entire season with Daeron barely making any sort of interaction with Caesarion, let alone flying her into battle. I doubt they'll kill the young prince off without allowing him to saddle even once. Moreover, Ryan has mentioned how Caesarion has a great role to play in the story yet to come, so maybe the final season will be when the dragon finally lives up to that hype. We already know that the second Battle of Tumbleton is happening, especially because Aegon and Aemond were discussing how they would first fly to the Market City before breaking down the gates of King's Landing. So, my theory is that with Gwain's guidance, Daeron would be the one spear heading for the next Battle of Tumbleton, which is supposed to be the biggest battle of the entire Dance of the Dragons. With Ormond no longer separating Daeron from Caesarion, we'll finally get to see the medal on the young prince. For all I know, the second Battle of Tumbleton is happening, and Daeron will be the one mogging it all. Of course, given the trajectory of the show, it's difficult to assume how they would deal with his death, but I wouldn't be surprised if Daeron really does leave everything behind and sails to the free cities, for a more peaceful life. However, that's just my 2 cents. What do you guys think? Let us know your thoughts and theories in the comments below. If you liked the video, please hit like, subscribe to our channel, and be sure to ring that notification bell so you don't miss out on any more of our marvelous videos. Stay safe, have a great day, and as always, stay marvelous.